You're listening to The Grind. Well-caffeinated conversations with disc golfers who are passionate about improving their games and helping others to do the same. Welcome to episode 17 of The Grind, a disc golf podcast. I'm Josiah, and with me, my good friend David. We're going to talk some disc golf.
How's it going, guys?
We have a fun episode lined up for you today. We are going to get a pro tip from Brian Earhart. We are going to review the Discraft Vulture. And we are just going to talk about gratitude as a strategy for scoring better. But first, David, what are you sipping on? How was your disc golf week?
Oh, we're sipping on another one from that Serenia coffee farm from the Wasatch Roasting Company from our Ogden trip. This is the second of, we actually got 3 coffees from them, and they're all from that Serenia farm, just processed differently. This is, we talked about the anaerobic fermentation process on that podcast. This is another anaerobic fermentation process, but this is a natural coffee. Last time it was a washed. This time it's a natural, and a natural means that the beans are dried with the cherry on it, so it gives it a little bit more of a fruity taste. And anaerobic means that they're tossed into fermentation tanks, and they actually let them ferment for a little bit, so it just kind of creates a little bit of a unique flavor profile. But man, this is, my second cup that I've ever had from Thailand, and this is an incredible cup of coffee. The tasting notes on here, I'm definitely picking up some strawberry. The thing that popped into my mind was watermelon. It's not a tasting note, but that's something that was kind of popping into my head. We got tasting notes on here that say strawberry, Pop-Tart, pineapple, and lychee, if I'm saying that correctly. It's a type of berry from China. It kind of looks like a dragon fruit almost. Like raspberry kind of type thing.
I wouldn't know. I've never heard of one, let alone tried it. But sure, I'm sure I'm picking that up as well.
But definitely getting some strawberry in here, some sweetness going on. It's a fun cup, man. It's super tasty. I think if you're wanting to have an experience with a cup of coffee, this will give you one heck of an experience with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's sweet. Like really fruity, really sweet. But I think that fermentation keeps it from being like too bright. It's almost like it gives it some undertones that are, I don't know, a little funky. Yeah. It's really good.
I think if my grandpa had this cup of coffee, he would ask me, "What is this? This is not coffee."
It's an experience. That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's really good. This is what I had at the shop when we were in Ogden playing the fort, and I was like, I almost didn't get it, and the barista told me, "Oh yeah, you should try it." It was $1 more for the cup, and I was like, "Yeah," but I got it on pour over there, and it was fantastic. And David, you did it justice again. It's so good. Yeah, super fun cup for sure. And if you're ever in Ogden, obviously you have to play the fort. Obviously you have to throw hole 16. Looking over the mountains down towards the water and try not to lose the disc. And you got to stop at Wasatch and get their Serenia. And I think I like this one more than the wash.
I would agree. Absolutely agree. I'd rate this one probably. I would give this a 9 or 10 out of 10 as far as for me on if I'm wanting that experience and quality cup. This is an incredible cup of coffee. The other one I probably would have gone 7 or 8.
Yeah, and the wash was good, but it just wasn't as interesting. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of fun to see. The only difference in these two is they took the fruit off of one and washed it. They left the fruit on the other. Everything else was the same. Brewing method, everything else was the same, and you get wildly different cups.
Yeah, it's pretty fun that you can have different processes with the coffee using the exact same coffee and end up with completely and wildly different outcomes.
And they had this in the store, and I think online as a 3-pack sampler with the different processes. So if you want to order from them, again, it's Wasatch Roasting Company out of Ogden. You can order it on their website. It's pretty fun to try. They have a sampler pack, as I was saying. But anyway, how's your disc golf week, David?
Oh, it was a pretty good week, man. I think we got a round in together last weekend. Did we play after recording?
We played Saturday morning.
Okay, Saturday morning. And then I got 2 rounds in the past 2 days. Other than that, I kind of rested at the beginning of the week. I say rested, but it really is because the wind was absolutely insane.
It's been stupid.
I think we had probably over 25 to 30 mile an hour winds every single day.
With gusts, way more than that. I think, because people were getting their fences blown down and
it
all
was
that.
Insane. So yeah, we didn't play too much while it was windy, but the rounds that we did get to play had a lot of fun. I think had one of the most meaningful rounds this week that I've had last night playing with. It was me, Josiah, John, and our buddy Ryan Wilking, and we played all the way till sundown, and it was just an absolute blast. It was one of those. I think we all scored very poorly, but we all were having so much fun because I think we were just enjoying being out together with incredible weather. I mean, after the wind had just been nasty all week, and it was still a little windy. Yeah, it was still a little windy.
I think that's why we didn't score well.
Yeah. But I just had a blast, man. And I think this week really wasn't a scoring week for me. This week was definitely another one of those weeks of just trying to be intentional with learning. I'm really working on trying to fine-tune that forehand flex shot. I've been very reliant on a forehand hyzer, spike hyzer, forehand just power shot. But one thing I'm really trying to fine-tune is that flex shot with the forehand. And then I'm also trying to work on just having some more consistency with my backhand and also with the Berg in my bag. I'm starting to try to work on those little touch forehand shots that Josiah is really dang good at and frustrates me with.
Well, I'm annoyed now because I was the only buddy with a Berg, and now both you and John are throwing them well. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just the disc and not maybe in this case. In most cases, it's the archer, not the arrow. In this case, maybe in one, it's the arrow, not the archer.
And also, I think I got my first ace of 2022.
Yeah, dude.
I think that's the first one this year.
No, I'm sure it is. You would have told me.
No, I got like 5 and it was actually the last hole last night together. We were just kind of playfully joking around at the end because, again, scoring was not the best for all of us, but
yeah, we were pushing sunset. Well, we were beyond sunset. We were pushing dark for sure.
Couldn't really see too much at the end, and joked around, pulling out my flat top Firebird, saying, I'm going to go with the old faithful Skippy 2 shoes. And sure enough, Skippy 2 shoes.
Mid-throw, I joke, even if somebody aces here, we won't even know for sure because it's so dark.
Yeah. But little Skippy 2 shoes skipped right into the basket. and we could see it sitting there. At least I could see it sitting there. At least I just knew deep down in my soul.
I mean, you guys all seem very sure about it. I didn't look that hard, but I was like, I guess it's in.
How about you? How was your week?
It was a great week. We played Watson on Saturday, like you were saying, and didn't bogey, which I felt like good about. I was like, hey, I got 6 birdies and no bogeys, and I think I actually prefer that over like 8 birdies and 2 bogeys right now, just because it means like there's some consistency there. And then I played Watson in the morning, 2 mornings this week, which was just awesome. I try to do that in the summer once it gets light enough, and it's just now light enough that if I get there right as it's just light enough to start throwing, I can get a full round in. And I love it. I don't know that it's for everybody. Getting to the course before 6 a.m. so I can get to work at 7 is a little rough for me, and I'm sure it'd be extra rough for some who really like their sleep. But the course is empty, and the wind had died down usually in the morning before it picked up again during the day. So some really nice just way to start your day. And then last night was awesome. I really enjoyed playing with you guys, and game feels decent. I felt like pretty rusty at the beginning of the week, but I feel like the putt is starting to feel better and the drive is starting to feel better. Not a great round last night. I was telling David it was my first round over par in a while at Watson, but I actually went back and tabulated the scores, and I was like, oh, I was actually 1 under. So I had 2 double bogeys and 5 birdies, so it's just kind of funny. But it's when it's that windy and you're rushing, it's hard to take the time sometimes on your putts and stuff. So but it was fun, and we got to throw the Vulture some in the wind, which it's always good to test an overstable control driver with a little bit of wind. So
I think it was Monday I woke up to a text from you, or it was Monday or Tuesday I woke up to a text from you with a photo of playing around in the morning and telling me that I'm going to tell you what Paul Macbeth told Simon Lizotte. while you're sleeping, I'm practicing.
Yep. Good old Paul and Simon. He's got Simon still has the poster in his room that Paul wrote that note on it.
That's
Simon,
fantastic.
while you're sleeping, I'm working or practicing. Yeah, something like that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like occasionally I have to try to like build up our rivalry just to try to fuel my own competitiveness. And, you know, anytime you do something like wake up really early and play disc golf, and I mean, it's just for fun, and you feel good about that, you got to brag to somebody. So David gets that.
What's funny is that, I mean, historically I played a little bit better than you in tournaments, but you still have the best round of all of our friends at Watson, and that's what fuels me the most. Is I want that best score at Watson of all of our friends. And so I love the rivalry.
We are running out of holes. Like if you
running
go
out of holes
15, then I
separately.
go 16, and you go 17, I go 18, then the first guy to get 19 will have to start acing it.
Yep.
So, oh man. But yeah, I mean, disc golf is great, and sometimes taking a little bit of a step back and then getting back into it makes you appreciate it even more.
Yeah, for sure.
I got a tournament coming up in a couple weeks, so excited about that. My game feels rusty for a tournament, but I think I'll be able to pull it together.
Nice. Are you going to try to get out to play Palisade this weekend to practice?
It'll depend on the wind and time, but I'm hoping to.
Cool.
If not, then I'll probably try to get out there in the morning and play like 9 holes before work sometime.
Cool.
Well, you want to get into a pro tip?
Let's do it.
Brian Earhart was driving through town, was nice enough to stop at the Kiln Coffee Bar where John and David work, and I got to ask him for a pro tip.
Big thanks to Brian Earhart for coming in and giving us his pro tip.
This is my spot. This is my Colorado coffee spot.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you coming in. We had asked you, hey, what's one tip or what's one thing that you would tell somebody who's just starting out or somebody who wanted to level up their game?
Yeah, so I'm beginning to learn this more and more as I teach other players, that this is something that I wish somebody told me when I was younger, when I was starting to feel my way through form and refining my technique playing disc golf. Now that there's so much out there with technique, there's a lot to study. And I'm finding that there's a lot of players that are starting to try leveling up, so to speak, that will go to the field, do all these drills, they'll like film themselves, they'll do all this really mechanical work in the field, but they don't compartmentalize it. They take that same mechanical thought process and they bring it to the disc golf course when they're trying to play for score, whether it's a casual round with friends, somewhat competitive, or at a tournament when they're actually trying to win. That is the worst possible mindset when it comes to scoring in disc golf. So my biggest tip is separate technique work with execution work. So something big that I try to teach people is, make sure when you have an idea, you want to get out there, speak it, put definition to it. So when you're going to the field, tell yourself out loud, this is a technique day. This is a form day. When you say that, that means the way the disc is flying does not matter. It doesn't matter how the disc is coming out of your hand. All these new things are happening. It only matters how it feels and how it looks on camera. Obviously, if you're trying to study it versus somebody else. Once that's there, that's it. The moment you go to the disc golf course to take score, you shut your brain off, and it should all be feel at that point. You shouldn't be thinking about where are my feet, where's my arm, where's my elbow positioned, how do I fix my nose angle with my wrist and my grip. All of that stuff should not ever cross your mind. The whole goal of changing your form is to raise your potential. There's people with bad form that are really good disc golfers. The goal is to put all this work in the field on technique and then get in the habit of turning your brain off and then go try to keep score with whatever skill set you have that day. The goal is to have it kind of seep into your subconscious and have that new technique that you're developing kind of creep out of you, rather than say, I'm working on shortening my cross step. And then when you go to the course, okay, how's my cross step? How's my cross step? That's the last swing thought you want to have. So that's my big tip, to shorten it. Technique work stays in the field, execution on the disc golf course.
And you do think it will seep through that, yeah, you may have a little bit different form in the field versus on the course under pressure, but as you put that work in the field, that will work into your tournament game or your regular round game.
Absolutely. So that's at least my perspective now. That's the most natural progression that you can have. That's what you want. You don't want to feel like you're forcing it as like your new technique. Like you're on the disc golf course, and instead of throwing the way it's most natural, you're trying to make that new change happen way too hard.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense because you're going to focus on the form. You won't focus on your target anymore.
Exactly.
So if you do have these thoughts come up like, hey, I just shanked it off to the right, I know that's because I took too long of a cross step. And that led me, whatever, to lead point with my foot, whatever that thing is. What would be your suggestion in terms of getting yourself back to playing by feel? Because I'm a pretty mental person. Sounds like I'm crazy. That's probably true too. But I think too much sometimes. Do you have any suggestions there?
Yes, thinking too much is it's an epidemic in the disc golf world because thinking is only good when you need to use the skill of thinking. On the disc golf course, most of the time, you have an answer to any situation that you're in. Even if it's a hole that's really challenging, you probably know what the most natural shot is for you. So when you're having the thought of like, oh no, my cross step was too long and it's causing me to shank right, I can't say that there's a fix in the moment. I think it's a habit over time that you have to develop. You have to really focus on, like I said, once you get in the habit of leaving the technique thoughts in the field and then going into the disc golf course and just throwing caution to the wind and whatever skill set you have is what you're playing with that day. If you can do that over time and you put enough hours in the field and then you keep playing on the disc golf course, like that's going to change. You're not going to have those thoughts after a while. But the other thing when it comes to mentality and self-talk is make sure that you're speaking to yourself objectively all the time, especially if you're speaking out loud to yourself. I see so many disc golfers that will call their shots terrible or they'll call their shots awful or some, variation of good or bad. And that's all subjective. That's all opinionated. The moment players start to only label their shots objectively, like, oh, that was too right, late release, early release, and stop trying to diagnose it because it already happened, that's when you start to really clear your mind.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and that's helpful for my own game. Have you read from the ball golf side, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect? Yes. Oh, man. What you're saying totally speaks to me because that's the book I read when I just didn't have any background in mental game on the athletic side. And I was like, oh, this makes total sense. And I feel like it's a great resource for anybody. Yeah, it is ball golf side, but I do feel like there's overlap.
Oh, of course, because it's a game of execution. You prepare, and then you execute. But there is a right and wrong way to do that, to prepare and execute. And I think what a lot of people forget in disc golf, and this goes back to kind of what I've been saying, technique is not going to solve all your problems. You still have to be able to have a clear mind under pressure when it matters most and throw something that you've been able to do, something that you've programmed yourself to do by practicing. You can't throw a really technical line with a disc unless you've made the disc fly that technical line before in practice. So I definitely think that knowing what the purpose of skill is, but then also knowing that even if you don't have perfect form, you can shoot 1,000 rated round of disc golf. It's not difficult. It's minimizing the elementary mistakes and getting up and down.
Yeah.
And that's feel.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Well, Brian, thank you so much for stopping by and giving us your pro tip. We are big fans of you and your game and now what you're doing on the coaching side as well as with the Disc Golf Pro Tour. So thank you for your influence on the disc golf community. We really appreciate you.
And I love you guys too. Every time I come through here, I try to get a cup of coffee from you guys. You guys rock.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool to talk to Brian and just to get his thoughts on what I think is something that I've always struggled with, and I think something that I think a lot of people struggle with when they're trying to improve their game. What do you think, David?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things that he mentioned in there is that I'm talking about thinking as a skill. As far as thinking's a great skill when you need it, but when you allow yourself to overthink, it no longer is it a skill. And I think being able to think on the course and use that thinking to execute then after, there's something to say. Especially early on when we were playing, and I was really trying to figure out how to get distance because especially with my backhand, I was only getting 200 at the beginning. With my forehand, I was probably getting like that between 280 to 300. And I was really trying to figure out what I needed to do with my footwork, where I needed my body to be, so many different things, so many different variables that I was thinking so much on the tee pad. And every single time I'd just get flustered after a tee shot. And if it was a bad shot, I would just lose my mind because you are constantly thinking about so much and you're wanting to see some sort of result. And when you don't see it, you get frustrated. But if you're working in the field and you're throwing shots over and over again and working on those, working on your form, and you end up having bad shots and good shots, you're not going to find yourself being so frustrated and upset as you would in a round. So, I mean, I love it, especially, I think this is something that goes not only early on in your game, but it just continues to build and build and build. And it's something that you can apply to your game throughout your entire journey, wherever you're at in disc golf. It's just a good mental approach to the game, and I love it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's a lot to unpack there. One thing, just kind of going back to, the basic beginning of his pro tip, which was, hey, separate out technique from execution and build a wall in your mind of, hey, I'm working on technique right now today. I'm working on execution. So I think that that's really tough because for AMs and probably for pros, they're touring and stuff, so they don't have that much time. It's tough to make the time to get into the field. It's tough to want to. So a lot of times we're trying to improve something on the course and judging ourselves harshly by our score at the same time. And I feel like that ends up with this like downward spiral where you're trying to fix your form while you're trying to score well. And so making that clear separation, like, hey, I'm working on my game right now and I'm working on these specific things today. And sometimes, and I think what you did was say, I want to score really well today. I bogeyed hole 1. I really want to work on my technique today.
Just change your approach.
And that works too. Like, I think the field course makes a lot of sense. Like, it's a good divide. It's a clean divide. But I do think you could do it even while you're on the course. Like, hey, today I'm working on, I think Joel, who had our AMs Helping AMs a couple weeks ago, said, hey, I'm doing a putter round. I'm working on this one thing with my putters. That's fine. And I think that's even well and good because you've made the decision on the front end what you're working on.
Yep.
Then I think you need to ignore your score. You can keep your score and take it as a bonus, but I think you need to ignore your score intentionally there. Whereas if you are trying to score your best score on the course, the last thing you need to do is say, well, today I'm trying to score my best score on the course, and I'm really trying to work on my nose angles with high-speed drivers.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've taken away a lot from as we've continued on with this podcast, with conversations with whether it is pros with Ryan that we've had on, or whether it's just from pro tips, is I've gone from being obsessed with keeping score of every single round that I have.
I know it was so weird to you when I would be like, I don't know what my score is.
Yeah,
early on,
to not really caring too much about my score. Typically, I'll keep track of my score a little bit at the beginning, and if I'm having a really hot round, I'll keep track. But for the most part now, if I'm just having an average round, I just never really keep track. I kind of have an idea of where I'm at, but I don't really care to know the exact outcome. And I think that just comes with being more intentional and caring more about learning than the actual outcome. And I think it's been really good for me mentally as far as just really enjoying rounds more, as opposed to feeling like I need to have this result in order for me to feel good about my round in disc golf.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. And when you're keeping score, especially if you're going for your personal record, that's all you end up with. Did I win or lose? Did I get my personal record or not? Or did I get close or not? And so I do think that the learning part of it is helpful. I think the hard thing is being able to make that switch. I think that's one of the things I've struggled with in tournaments because I am always felt like pretty free on the course in my practice rounds and such. And yeah, I kept score, but I usually would tabulate it at the end. I knew when I was doing well, I knew when I was doing poorly. I think sometimes it was hard for me to flip that switch to like, hey, what's the smartest play here? What's the best way to score well? Because I was mostly interested in getting better. And in the tournament round, you have to be able to flip the switch to, no, my goal is to score well. And I think that's one of the reasons that I think, I could be wrong, but one of the reasons that I think you may score better than me in a tournament round versus a casual round is because in the casual rounds, for a while at least, you were so focused on score. And I think it actually worked for you. I think it actually kept you focused on the smartest play. And I was focused on throwing cool shots a lot of times. So, I don't know. Getting back to one of the things he was saying when he said working on technique that I thought was helpful, and it's like a little nugget in there, was he said, hey, when you're working on technique, don't worry about the result or how the throw looks. Focus on how it feels and focus on how your form looks if you're videoing yourself. And I think that's something that I don't do a good enough job about. I'm like, hey, my form felt good, but it went the same as my form that looks bad or feels bad. So I didn't get that distance. I didn't get that, whatever that is. Usually it's distance. Like, hey, I didn't get the extra 20 feet. Therefore, my field work was a waste of time. And in the same way we're talking about with the score, I think sometimes I judge my field work and my form work by immediate results. And I think that's just an interesting nugget he had is like, no, you should judge it by how it feels and how it looks on camera if you're videoing yourself.
Yeah. And I think that comes with just the process of things. I mean, we talked with Eric Oakley last week talking about how growth isn't this consistent. We're experiencing this continuous steady climb in your disc golf game. It's these highs and lows as you continue to progress and learn new concepts, learn new shots. I mean, I found myself at times with my backhand foot, all of a sudden I found it. I've got it. And then a week later, I don't have it anymore. And I'm trying to figure out and fine tune, okay, what am I doing? I think knowing and being aware that growth is, I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not linear.
Yeah, it's not linear, but yeah, it kind of applies to what Earhart is talking about here.
No, for sure. No, I think that's spot on. I think the other thing that he mentioned that I thought was pretty interesting is he was talking about self-talk and how to objectively talk to yourself about the round. And I think that this is something that people struggle with on all levels, whether it's externally verbalizing it or internally. And I often don't pay enough attention to my self-talk until I actually hear it out loud. Like, get it up, Josiah, or like, give it a chance, Paige, like you say. But honestly, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, that was terrible, or, whatever. I feel like a lot of times my self-talk is negative. And, I liked what he was saying about having an objective dialogue, which is like, okay, that was a late release, and then letting it go and moving on. And I think that is something that I struggle with and want to get better at, which is like, no, we don't need to amplify the mistake by giving it power by verbalizing it more than like subjectively. I
like that in general because I think the most that I apply that in my game is my putting game. Because I think now that, when you've putted so much, what your mistakes are typically. And for me, I have a couple mistakes that I go to, whether it's babying the putt and hitting the bottom of the basket or swinging my arm out wide and going right of the basket. And so I immediately can recognize and tell myself, you did this. And so I go to the next putt or the next putt that I do have, and I make that adjustment. And I don't have to think about it again because I know that this is what I need to do to get to where I want to be. And I love that. I think you can't play things out to be too big in your head because it's not something that you're going to continue to make that mistake. You have to know that you've trained your body to do this, and you can get back to this. You just need to be aware of what your mistakes are.
Yeah, and I think that the tough in-round adjustments to technique are very dangerous to me in terms of where my thoughts go. I think it's something, Brian was saying, I think this is so helpful. Like, it's a learned skill to be able to like turn on and off that side of your brain. And so for me, I have to be very careful to say like, oh, I need to, whatever it is, I need to follow through better on my putt, or I need to give it a little bit more height or whatever, because I think then I'll be thinking about that instead of actually putting the disc in the basket. So I do think that I totally agree, but I think it is a learned skill to be able to say, this is the adjustment required, and then implement that adjustment without actually letting that adjustment throw you off. Paul Macbeth, he does some commentary on one of his 18 down rounds, and what he had a made putt from like 30 or 45 feet that was a little bit off, and he was talking about in the commentary how he said, oh, it was a little wobbly, I think, or something like that. He's like, oh, I need to clean that up. And so he made the decision to clean it up after that putt and clean it up on the next putt. That, to me, is he can do that because he's worked on the skill of, oh, I make the adjustment and then I forget the adjustment and I just let my body do the thing. And I think that so often we can get tied up in the adjustment. Like, I don't know. I think that there is some degree to which those mechanics are most often better left unthought of and unadjusted if you're going to have that issue, which I tend to have. But I think it is different for each person. And one other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, how do you square what Brian was saying with what Joel Freeman said, I don't know, 6 episodes ago or so? Because Joel Freeman was talking about, hey, I made changes before my best tournament finish of the year the day before, and I rolled with them.
Yeah. I think part of it comes with personality. I think in general, the most applicable is what Brian was talking about. I don't think everybody can go into a tournament and make adjustments throughout a tournament. I don't think that's wise for the majority of people. I think if you are an adaptable person and enjoy changing things up, I think, and it doesn't cause you anxiety or stress with scoring, I think if changing something up would cause you stress with messing up your round, then don't do it. Because if you're going to put yourself in bad headspace, it's not going to be helpful for you. I think having a clear answer in your brain, I love what Earhart's saying, because it kind of tells you, just keep it simple. Keep the game simple. The more that you can keep the game simple, I think you're going to end up with a better scoring, a better outcome. But I think by all means, if you end up towards middle, bottom of the pack, why not make adjustments in the round? Because then you're having to experience the pressure of a tournament. I get with less pressure being towards the bottom while making some adjustments. And so in your head, one thing for me with the Palisade tournament, that was one of the first tournaments that I was throwing a decent amount of backhand shots. I think 40% of my drives were backhand. I had never really thrown backhand drives in tournaments because I
remember Watson States last year. You had a bit of an injury.
Yeah.
But you threw one backhand.
One backhand, yeah. It gave me so much anxiety and stress to throw a backhand because I didn't feel like I can rely on it. Even though I didn't have a terrible backhand, I had something I could rely on. And I think that Palisade round, even though I didn't score super well, I finished, I guess, top 10. But I didn't score super well, but I ended up walking away from the tournament feeling like, okay, I can throw a backhand in a tournament. I know I could rely on this. And so I think there's 2 worlds that you're working on, but I really like what Earhart's saying. And I think from a coaching principle, it makes the most sense to build those concepts into your head early on to continue to build your game. And I think Joel Freeman kind of speaking from almost as a pro, I feel like you feel a little bit more comfortable and confident in making adjustments. I think for me, if I was making an adjustment in the middle of a tournament, I would start to get pretty anxious. Like, don't mess this up, David.
But I do think it is like what gives you confidence.
Yeah.
And I do think that pros have experienced enough ups and downs in tournaments to know, like, hey, if my new backhand form is giving me confidence, I'm going to have a problem if I go back to my old one.
Mm-hmm.
So I might as well try the new one because I feel most confident, or new putting style, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
I think the key is, I doubt that Joel Freeman mid-throw was thinking, oh, keep my elbow up. Keep the elbow up.
Yep.
Don't late release. I think he was thinking, I'm aiming at this spot in the sky, or this spot on this distant horizon, and I'm gonna smash my drive, and I at this angle. And I just don't think that he was. I think that he probably has enough biomechanic self-awareness to be able to say, I'm making this change. Now I'm going to implement the change. Maybe in his pre-shot he's thinking about it, but I think he's able to. I doubt that he did well because he was focused on form
for sure
mid-shot.
For sure.
And I do think in the end, like all my best rounds at Watson are when I felt the most free and thought the least. And that doesn't mean that I didn't think. It just means that my thinking time was very compartmentalized. It was before my pre-shot routine, disc selection, disc angle, wind, everything else. And then pretty much the rest of the round, I wasn't thinking about disc golf. Even while I was throwing, I wasn't thinking about disc golf. I was just thinking about the target.
Yeah.
That book, by the way, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect by Bob Rotella, I definitely would recommend it to anybody who's looking for some basic basis for the mental side of a strategy sport like ball golf or disc golf. I think it's very applicable, and it was super helpful for me.
That's awesome. And before we move on, I just want to give a shout out to Brian Earhart. We're super pumped that he took the time to sit down with Josiah and have that conversation. We met him a couple years ago coming through the shop, and we kept up with him throughout the pro tour when he was playing. Just a fantastic human, fun to watch him play. I got a couple of Brian Earhart discs in my bag still, and got a little Bearheart patch on my bag. Enjoy keeping up with you, man. Keep rocking it. Enjoying what you're doing now with the coaching side. And also, I think he has a flight diary podcast that he's doing.
Yeah, so besides our podcast, obviously, the best podcast in disc golf to me is Flight Diary.
Yeah.
And just awesome interviews with pros. If you haven't listened to it, you should. They haven't done a lot, but Brian did tell me that there's an announcement coming up with that podcast. I can't spill the beans here, probably. I don't know that Brian would appreciate it. And then I know he's actually coming out with another podcast with a pretty cool technique coach that's, I think, starting to become really well known. And they're going to do a joint podcast on technique. And so I think that's going to be an invaluable resource. So
that's awesome.
There's a lot coming down the line for him. And so, yeah, big thanks to Brian.
Cool.
I wanted to talk to you, David. This is a bit of a continuation from our conversation last week based on Eric Oakley's tip. Thanks again to Eric for sending that in. But I wanted to talk about gratitude as a bit of a strategy for better disc golf. And some of this is really just something that I've been working through and working on at part of my game. And also just something that our conversation with Eric Oakley's pro tip last week brought up. And then also, if you watch Morning Coffee with the Oakleys, they do it, I think, once a week. The one after Champions Cup, Eric's talking about, it's one of his first tournaments of the year coming back from injury, and just how he was changing the way that he was talking about himself and thinking about himself on the course. Eric just seems like this joyful, fun guy, but I think occasionally on the course, like a lot of us, he gets pretty frustrated, and it just listen to him to be open and honest about how he's changing that and how he was playing better because of it, and enjoying the round and the tournament because of that was super cool to listen to. And I thought we could kind of bring that into the conversation for ourselves. And one thing that I do when I'm having a poor round, have a bad shot, etc., is I try to take myself out of the shot or out of the round mentally, and not like, hey, I'm not going to focus anymore or anything like that, but rather I can't control my thought process. I can't get it out of the, oh, you suck at disc golf, Josiah, you're terrible, you're all late releasing everything, you can't make a putt, you're not committing, whatever that is. None of that's helpful. And I think a lot of times I just try to turn to gratitude as a way in which, one, I think it's just a good principle, and we can talk about that, but as a way in which to refocus myself or to stop focusing on the negatives. And we talked last week about, hey, you want to identify your mistakes, but you don't want to have your identity in your mistakes. And I think along those lines, I sometimes am like, if the weather's decent, I usually pick the weather, but it's like, hey, there's something good happening right now. I'm healthy, I'm alive, the weather's good, the wind is at least a tailwind on my next putt, whatever those things are. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And I know it's kind of a strange concept maybe to think of gratitude as a way to get better at disc golf or to play better, but I think it works for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think gratitude is a basic principle. We hear so often in general, going to the life side of things to apply it to disc golf. You hear so often people being discontent with their job, being discontent with the city that they're living in, being discontent with the friendships that they have, whatever it might be. And yeah, there might be things that we can complain about. There might be things that are subpar of what we would like them to be. But I'm a big proponent and encourage when I do have those conversations with friends as far as I think if we as humans can't learn to be grateful where we're at, we'll never be able to be grateful when we do arrive at whatever we perceive as that ideal lifestyle, whether it's whether it's a home that you're working towards, or whether it's a job you're working towards, or whether it is that city that you want to be in. We'll never be grateful if we're not grateful where we are now. And so I think, applying that to disc golf, of being able, we're able to get out and play disc golf as a hobby. How fun is that? That's incredible. And I think just starting there and recognizing that this is just a fun thing to do with friends, and how awesome is it that we have buddies that we're get excited about the same goofy thing that people might see us as ridiculous. I have a regular customer at the coffee shop that's a big hockey fan, and I always make fun of hockey to him, and he always just kind of scoffs at me of I'm not going to take this from a guy that plays disc golf. And I just appreciate that. I love that we get so excited about a game that people perceive as being kind of this goofy sport, but we put so much energy and we take it so seriously that it's so much fun to us. And I love that we have that community to share with people. And I think as we continue to grow into that as friends and having our community, it's changed the game for me. Because I think early on playing, I was so concerned about the outcome that whenever the outcome didn't happen, which was very often, didn't happen in what I expected it to be, I would just end up the entire round pissed, angry, annoyed. And which
is definitely what you want to be when you're trying to have fun, when you're doing something for the purpose of having fun.
And of course it puts everybody else into bad space that you're playing with. And
I didn't mind at all when you're playing for it. That actually made me pretty pumped.
Back in the day when I lost to Josiah every time. But I think it's the gratitude's huge. It's just across the board. I think it's a principle that we need to learn how to apply to our lives. And I think applying it to our disc golf game will widely change the outcomes of our rounds.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I don't think that there's any downside. There's a lot of things that have a trade-off. I don't think gratitude has one.
I agree.
And I think it's free. It's not always easy to generate. When you're frustrated, angry, depressed, whatever, there are lots of things going bad for you in your life. I've lived a pretty easy life, but I know a lot of people have not. I'm not an expert at how you get gratitude when you're living in a third world country or whatever those things are. You're experiencing a ton of tragedy in the moment, but I know that it's biographies and such are so helpful because you can say, hey, people do it. It is possible. And for me, like you're saying, I'm hey, I get to play disc golf. Oh, I shanked that putt. I get to try the exact same putt, or maybe even a little further. I get to try. Even if that seems silly, I try to frame my next shot or the round or the tournament or my disc golf game in a way that is not necessarily optimistic, but it is focusing on the things that are positive and good and trying to let go of the things that are negative. And I do really think it makes a big difference. And I think it's actually more effective in the long run than using a slight or bitterness or a chip on your shoulder to be effective. So many famous athletes, they have to build that chip and they got to keep adding to that chip. So Tom Brady, drafted in the 6th round, famously picked number 199, and he's used that year after year after year to fuel himself. Hey, I need to prove the doubters wrong. But that starts to ebb away when you're married to a supermodel and you have won 7 world championships, Super Bowls as they're called. And I do think that they have to find a new one. They think I'm too old, whatever that is. And I think that works. But I think that for the casual disc golfer, I think gratitude is a much better strategy, and it requires a little less maintenance than a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, for sure. I think the moment for me realizing that my mindset had changed was actually in the middle of a tournament round. It was crazy windy at Delta last year during the NADGT tournament, and I threw a forehand with my flat top Firebird, and it slammed into a tree right next to the basket that was about 5 feet from the basket, and then flipped up on its side and rolled into the river because it was so windy. The wind pushed into the river.
This is the second round of a pretty important tournament.
Yeah, second round. And I was pretty close to the top, so I was definitely chasing. I was on the chase card. And I just laughed. I laughed. It was just like, well, I know that outcome was ridiculous. From how I threw it, like I should have been parked. I expected to be parked. But so I just kind of laughed because I just thought it was funny. I'm like, how ridiculous is that happened? Like, there's nothing that I could have done to control that. It was the wind did that. And there was a guy on my card that looked at me and was just confused. Like, I would be so pissed right now if that happened to me. And him responding to me that way, I kind of just like, yeah, I mean, I guess I would have felt that way before, but for some reason to me, I think there was at some point this mindset change with playing that really helped me improve because I was able to walk away from that hole with a bogey. I just pitched up to the basket, putted it in, took the bogey, and I walked to the next hole not being upset because I didn't get my birdie, but still enjoying having fun with the round because that was the best I could have done with the outcome that happened. There was nothing I could have done to change it.
Being mad would have only had that shot linger longer to the next hole.
Exactly. I would have walked into the next hole being flustered and impacted that next shot. And so I think there's something to say about we've talked about it before, just being able to, it's one shot at a time and you have to let it go. If something happens, you let it go, move on to the next shot.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. I think in the end, with all of these things, I think that we can take energy to be frustrated at the tree that shouldn't have been there, or the wind, or the weird skip, or the weird bounce, or we can just kind of appreciate the fact that there is a certain amount of randomness in it, like so many things in life. And, even if it's us throwing the bad shot, or whether it's the crazy wind picking up your disc and throwing it into the river even after and going birdie to bogey, like there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to get into a disc review?
Let's do it.
It's time for the What Was That disc review. This week, we have the Discraft Vulture, which is a 10-speed, 5-glide, 0-turn, and 2-fade control driver. Our listener and patron, Christopher Applin, was so kind to send us a few Vultures to try out. So big thanks to Christopher for sponsoring the episode or sponsoring the disc review. What did you think about the Vulture, David?
The Vulture's fun, man. It reminded me of the Onyx. I recently tossed the Onyx into my bag after our disc review, and the Vulture definitely for me was reminiscent of it. And I was telling Josiah, I don't know if I would be able to identify enough of a difference to even choose one or the other. For me, I think I like the Onyx's branding a little bit better and the name. And so naturally I might gear towards, I love branding. It
just feels cooler.
It feels cooler.
Paul Macbeth throws it.
Paul Macbeth throws it, so it just makes me feel good. And I think maybe that comes down to arm speed. I mean, maybe that's just at the top or maybe a little bit above my arm speed. And so I'm not able to see a significant difference, I guess. I'm not sure what it is, but definitely for me, it was, I really enjoyed it. I mean, definitely has that stability in the wind. You can put it out straight and it's going to definitely, push it hard at the end and, get you a nice little skip up to the basket.
Yeah. Straight to fade for sure. I totally agree about the Onyx. I was actually talking to Brian Earhart when he was in the shop about the Vulture. What he was saying is, Paul Macbeth really liked a particular run of Vultures, and so he basically went to Discraft and said, make me a disc that is like this run. And I think what you ended up with in general, at least according to the flight numbers, a Vulture once again is a 10.502, and Onyx is a 10.603, and so maybe a little glidier, maybe a little bit more overstable Vulture. But when you look at the discs side by side and you get the feel, they are indistinguishable to me. They feel so close, and if you line them up, they look so close together. Dave and I were just looking at them on my countertop, and it's very hard to tell the difference. And so it makes sense that in flight you wouldn't be able to tell that much of a difference. I would say that the Vultures that we throw through, so we threw an ESP that actually Brian Earhart gave to us, a Z and a Sparkle Glow that Christopher Applin sent to us. And I would say, in general, that the Sparkle Glow to me flew like a normal fresh stock Onyx. Like they felt very similar. And the Z felt maybe a hair straighter than the off-the-shelf Onyx to me. But it was really close. I don't think that it was significantly different. And I even think if you had a ton of arm speed, it would be, and Brian Earhart actually mentioned this, but depending on the run of the Vulture or the Onyx, which one would be overstable versus understable. Like they're not different enough molds that you're going to have a specific plastic or run not overlap some.
For sure. That makes sense.
So just like the Onyx, I'd say, yeah, straight to fade is pretty consistent, pretty overstable, but not ridiculously so. I think that the Vulture may be a little bit more approachable if what I think is true, which is that the Onyx has a little bit more fade at the end. But I don't know. I do think, at our arm speed, a 10-speed control driver, you're not going to hyzer flip it at our arm speed and elevation so most out of the box. And so it'd be interesting to see how they'd wear and how they compare as they wore. Brian described the Vulture as a little bit more neutral, and he said that because he uses the Onyx or the Vulture and Onyx for forehands, he actually liked the Onyx a little bit more because he could get a little bit more overstable ones more consistently. But it's a good control driver. It's solid. I'd say I think I get a little bit more distance with my Onyxes, and once again, you don't know particular run, whatever. I usually go for the little straighter, a little less overstable Onyxes, and with the Onyxes versus the Vultures, I threw on the same hole. I threw them both last night, and the Onyx was on a little worse of a shot and didn't get a skip, and the Vulture a little straighter shot with the skip, and they were like right next to each other. And so it's like, I don't even know. I think that I don't think you could bag both easily and be able to say, oh, this is for this and this is for that, unless you had a particular run that was more or less stable.
For sure. That makes sense.
I don't think we have to belabor the review. You can go back to our Onyx review and you could probably apply a lot of this to the Vulture.
Yeah.
I think it's a good disc. I don't think it's a beginner disc. I think it's right at the edge of our arm speeds. Our buddy Ryan Wilking, who throws 500-ish, threw it a bit last night, and it was straight to stable. It was straight to an overstable finish for him as well. So I do think even for the top arm, big arm players, fresh out of the box, it's going to be not understable, not flippy by any means. I think it's a good disc.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to go straight into ratings?
Let's do it.
All right, David. Our rating system, we each rate it 1 to 5. Some are scores to 10. 1 is it's just not that great of a disc. 2 is it's a fine disc, but there's better options out there. 3 is it's a good disc, but it doesn't stand out. 4 is it's a fantastic disc, but it's not going to make my bag. And 5 is it's going in the bag. So, David, what's your rating?
I think I'm going to probably give it a 4. I mean, I think it's a great disc. Enjoy throwing it. Reminds me of the Onyx, obviously, like I said. I bagged the Onyx, so, maybe at some point I think it could be interchangeable for me, but like I said, I like the branding of the Onyx and I like the name, and we'll see. Enjoy it. It's a good disc.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5, and the only reason I'm not going to give it a full 4 is I think that the Onyx gave me a little bit more distance for the same basic disc, and I don't have enough familiarity to know if it really stands out. It seems like a really solid, consistent disc. The Onyx stood out to me a little bit more because of that glide. I don't know the Vulture has quite the same glide, but they are so similar. So I'll give it a 3.5. That's a 7.5 out of 10, so a solid score for a more than solid disc. And that's our disc review. And the majority of our episode. But David, first, we're building our perfect disc golfer. So this week I thought we could do forehand upshots and backhand drives. So for forehand upshots, you got to pick a pro either side. Who are you going to pick?
Oh, man, forehand upshots. Oh, let's go Jeremy Colling with forehand upshots.
Oh, I was going to go with Colling, so I'm going to pick somebody different. That's a good call. Why Jeremy?
Jeremy's, when I think of forehand players and control, Colling's up there, especially, I love Sexton, but actually, if I was going to pick somebody with a little bit more control through the trees and whatnot, I'd probably go Colling over Sexton. I think Sexton has the power over Colling. But I really enjoy what Coling does with the forehand.
Yeah, no, I like that for sure. I would have gone Coling, and my other thought was Ricky Wysocki because his big forehand approaches are ridiculous. But since I already have him for circle 2 putting, I'm going to go Yuli. And this is maybe doing a little bit of favor to Yuli and judging him more on his perception of his forehand than his actual forehand. But he says he's the best forehand, one of the top 5 forehanders on the planet. And I do think under like 300 feet, he has a very strong forehand game. So I'm going to give it to the Discraft team captain, Paul Ulibarri. But if Brian Earhart was playing, that would have been a top one too, for sure. All right, backhand drives. When I'm saying backhand drives, we'll say under 500 feet.
Under 500 feet,
Yep.
backhand drives.
Yeah, and this would be in the woods, out of the woods, all that. And then we'll do pure distance after that. Not this week.
I'll go with Dickerson. Chris Dickerson.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
He's got a sick backhand.
yeah, for sure.
That's a good call. I'm going to go with Macbeth. I think under 500 feet, there's nobody better on the backhand than Macbeth. And there's nobody who's got more versatility than Macbeth on his backhand. But you couldn't go wrong with Dickerson. I think Conrad, just because he's so strong with the backhand, is definitely up there. But I'll take Macbeth. I did take him for circle 1, so this my convoluted dream disc golfer is starting to look a lot like Paul Macbeth, but that's fine.
Cheater.
That's the episode this week. If you want to win Frisbees, we've got some giveaways still up on our Instagram page from last week. We have an Oakley giveaway package, and we'll be giving away some vultures this week. And thanks for listening. And whether it's coffee or disc golf, don't forget to enjoy the grind.